The Galactic Council chamber was silent. 1,000 voices, 1,000 minds, but at that moment, all attention was on one figure, standing alone, rigid, and out of place among the towering forms of the galaxy's so-called enlightened species. Elias Carter, humanity's first representative, let his gaze sweep across the assembly. He had expected the scrutiny, the whispers, the skepticism. It was written in every flicker of bioluminescent skin, every twitch of antennae, every telepathic murmur shared behind closed minds. He was an anomaly here, an outsider, a Deathworlder. The Xylarian Elder, the council's chairman, let out a slow exhale through his spherical lungs, a sound of measured displeasure. "Your species," he began, "is unexpected, an anomaly of evolution. You thrive in chaos, endure suffering, and yet, here you stand, requesting a seat among civilizations that have existed for millennia before your kind first learned to shape fire." A ripple of amusement passed through the assembly. Some didn't bother hiding their disdain. Others, more diplomatic, merely watched, waiting for the inevitable humiliation. Carter didn't react. He had spent enough time among politicians to recognize condescension disguised as diplomacy. He had seen the reports, studied the transcripts. To them, humanity's existence was an inconvenience, an accident of nature rather than a rightful participant in the grand design of interstellar politics. But facts didn't care for opinions, and neither did he. "I'm not here for your approval," Carter said, his voice even, his stance unwavering. "I'm here because humanity has already earned its place." A murmur, unspoken challenge. The chairman regarded him for a long moment before gesturing with a slow, deliberate wave of his elongated digits. "Enlighten us, then. Why should we grant a species from a death world influence over the affairs of the Council?" Carter could have listed humanity's scientific contributions, its rapid advancements in medicine, engineering, or its unexpected diplomatic efforts along the galactic frontier. He could have spoken of humanity's resilience, its adaptability, the way it had survived against odds that would have eradicated most species in their infancy. Instead, he chose the truth. "Because we've already fought your wars for you." Silence. The statement landed like a hammer, its weight undeniable. Carter stepped forward, his presence suddenly suffocating in the vastness of the chamber. "When the Xaner pirates raided your trade routes, it wasn't diplomacy that stopped them. It was human pilots flying outdated ships against overwhelming odds. When the Tervaxi plague threatened to spread across 3 systems, it was human scientists who burned entire colonies to contain it, making decisions your moral codes refused to allow. Eyes, some organic, some artificial, locked onto him. "You need us," he continued. "Not because we're stronger, not because we're smarter, but because we make the decisions you won't, the ones that need to be made." The silence stretched. The chairman shifted in his seat, his mandibles clicking once in irritation, but Carter saw it, the hesitation, the truth settling in, whether they wanted to acknowledge it or not. After a long pause, the chairman spoke. "Very well. Humanity will have its seat." The words carried weight, a shift in the galactic order. But Carter knew, even as they granted him this momentary victory, that they didn't truly understand what they had just allowed. Not yet. The war began without warning. Reports flooded in, entire colonies wiped out, fleets reduced to wreckage in minutes. The Keth Dominion didn't negotiate. They didn't warn. They simply arrived, destroyed, and moved on. The council convened an emergency session. Panic spread through the chamber like wildfire, voices raised in fear and frustration. The Xylarian Elder called for restraint, urging the members to remain calm. Others demanded immediate action, but action required consensus, and consensus was something the council never achieved quickly. They debated for hours. Trade sanctions, peace envoys, defensive lines, all while the Keth tore through their systems with no sign of slowing. Every proposed measure was too slow, too weak, too hesitant. No one wanted to take responsibility for full-scale war. Carter sat in silence, watching them stumble over their own indecision. He had read the reports. He had seen the patterns. The Keth weren't an empire expanding its borders. They were a predator species, consuming and moving forward like a plague. There was no negotiating with something that didn't recognize diplomacy. Finally, he spoke. They have a central command structure. The words cut through the noise. The chamber fell quiet. Carter continued, his voice level. They operate like a hive. Kill the core, and the entire invasion collapses. The chairman regarded him with narrowed eyes. You assume much, human. I assume nothing, Carter replied. I've seen it before. Swarm tactics depend on a single directive. Remove that directive, and the Keth fall apart. Murmurs rippled through the assembly. Some dismissed the theory outright. Others hesitated. The idea had merit, but the solution it suggested was unthinkable. A Zelvarian noble turned toward him, his voice laced with contempt. And what do you propose, Deathworlder? That we strike their homeworld? Exterminate them like animals? Carter didn't hesitate. Yes. The chamber erupted. Outrage. Horror. Some called it genocide. Others called it madness. Even those who understood the logic recoiled from the sheer ruthlessness of the idea. The chairman raised a hand, restoring order. The council does not engage in extermination. Carter met his gaze without flinching. Then the council will watch its worlds burn. A long silence followed. The decision was already made. They just didn't want to face it. The vote was called. Humanity's proposal was rejected. The council would seek alternatives. Carter left without another word. He had wasted enough time. The strike was carried out before the council even realized what had happened. No long debates. No hesitation. Just action. A fleet of human warships, smaller than the grand armadas of the council, but infinitely more efficient, slipped past the front lines under the cover of specialized stealth technology. They didn't engage the enemy. They didn't waste time in prolonged battles. They had one objective, the Keth homeworld. Carter had studied the Keth. They were a hive species, not just in behavior but in biology. Their central command structure wasn't metaphorical, it was literal. A singular, planetary nerve center that directed the entire war effort. It wasn't just a leader. It was the Keth. They didn't give the Keth time to react. Orbital payloads were deployed with surgical precision, kinetic bombardments, artificial seismic triggers, and decoy charges. The planet didn't explode in a spectacular fireball. It collapsed. One moment, the Keth armadas were relentless tides sweeping across the stars. The next, they were nothing more than drifting vessels, their pilots dead before they even realized what had happened. The hive was gone. The Keth ceased to exist as a species in a single decisive moment. The operation lasted less than a day. A war that had threatened to consume the galaxy was over before most had even understood the scope of the battle. Then the real battle began. When the council received the reports, the chamber was deathly silent. Not relief. Not celebration. Fear. Pure, unfiltered fear. The chairman's voice was measured, but the undertone was unmistakable. You wiped them out. Carter didn't deny it. We stopped the war. The response was immediate. You committed genocide. He met the accusation without a flicker of hesitation. We did what needed to be done. They weren't listening. It didn't matter that the Keth had been an existential threat. It didn't matter that the alternative had been the slow destruction of everything the council held dear. All they saw was what humanity had proven, that they were willing to make the choices no one else would. The chairman spoke again, softer this time. Do you even understand what you've done? Carter didn't blink. Yes. The real question is, do you? The vote was swift. Unanimous. Humanity's seat on the council was revoked. No debate, no discussion. The decision had already been made before the session even began. Carter sat motionless as the ruling was read aloud. The words didn't matter. The outcome had been inevitable the moment the Keth ceased to exist. The council finds humanity's actions to be in direct violation of interstellar ethics. Effective immediately. No Deathworlder shall ever hold a seat in this assembly again. Some tried to justify it. They spoke of morality, of precedent, of the danger of allowing a species willing to wield such power to remain among them. Others didn't bother pretending. They were afraid, not just of what humanity had done, but what it meant for the future. Carter listened without reaction. He wasn't surprised. He wasn't even angry. The council wasn't built for survival. It was built for governance, for diplomacy, for maintaining an equilibrium that had been shattered the moment they encountered something that didn't play by their rules. When the final declaration was made, the chairman turned to him. "Do you have anything to say before you leave?" Carter stood, adjusted his uniform, looked out at the gathered leaders of the most powerful civilizations in the galaxy, beings who would rather die debating their own principles than face the reality of the universe they lived in. "Just this," he said. "When the next threat comes, you won't have us to save you." Without another word, he left. Decades later, the whispers still spread through the council chambers. The humans had returned to their own borders, expanding, advancing, watching. They never asked for reinstatement, never sought their seat again. But the fear remained, because deep down, the council knew the truth. They hadn't exiled humanity. They had only ensured that, when the next war came, the Deathworlders wouldn't be fighting it for them.